Hello, my name is Jesse Holland. I'm a grade 12 student at John McCrae, and I'll be telling you a little bit about my quitting social media experience. So last year around the end of January, beginning of February, I decided to quit social media. I did this because I had heard that kind of Facebook and Instagram were actually going out of their way to make the user more addicted to their apps. And I had just heard that kind of the big social media brands were up to no good. So I was like, you know what, if they're doing bad things, I don't really want to support them. And I decided to quit. Now, meanwhile, at the same time, I was in an anthropology class and I decided to take this up as kind of a self-observation project. I decided to kind of intellectually observe what was happening to my brain and what was happening to kind of the world around me at the same time while I sort of disconnected from the grid, the social media, right? So I started this at the end of January, beginning of February, and from then on, the rest is history. So the first thing that kind of happened was standard withdrawal symptoms, like from any addictive substance. Anxiety, kind of you feel deprived. You're a little bit on edge. You're not sleeping as well, and that continued for 2 months. But it wasn't unexpected. Other than the fact that it was kind of this sudden epiphany, the realization that, hey, wait a minute, I wasn't even a huge social media user, but yet I was feeling total addiction symptoms, and I didn't even realize it or even think about it. So moving on, I sort of took in my experience with addiction, and in sort of April, May, I started to speak to John McCrae grade 9 classes in the health unit and talk to the students about my experience and what it was like. And it was the phys ed staff was really on board, and they thought it was excellent because it was, for the first time, these students were hearing kind of peer teaching peer, and it was more like we're experiencing this social media, not the teacher saying you're experiencing this and you need to stop this. And the students found it was really quite relatable. Now, moving on throughout the summer and throughout the fall of this year being 2018, I continued on my observations. And what I started to observe was a little more scary. I'm not gonna lie to you. And it was more of a societal thing. And kind of the fact that we've made this kind of second reality for ourselves, and in this reality, it's almost well, it's quite complex actually, the way it is affecting us. But so I'll try to explain it to you here. In the second reality, every person who's on it sort of exists, and the second reality being all the social media platforms. And so let's use Instagram as an example. Instagram is basically right like the real world, except more shallow. There's no actual dialogue or real time, and everyone is constantly trying to make themselves look better on this platform, and it just from an outside perspective, it's a little chilling, and the fact that I was not just part of it. I was completely into it. And I had no, and the scary part was that I had no idea what was actually happening. I had some idea because people tell you, all the time that, social media is bad for you. So that I already had that preconceived notion, but I never really actually thought about it. And that kind of brings me to my next point about social media is thinking, and how how much more thinking I've done since I quit. And this is because I've figured out that it's because of a theory called the media flux theory, which is that humans constantly want more information, right? That's why we watch TV, that's why we use social media so much, that's why we read. It's because we like having information. And but basically the problem with social media is that it's TMI. It's too much information, and it's not like wholesome, well thought out information like reading a science article or even a fiction novel, right? It's tidbits of information, the 20-second picture, and it's you stare at a picture for not even 20 seconds, eh? Like 10 seconds, and that's taking up mind space. And basically what I found was we during the day when we're not working out, doing homework, eating, cooking, reading, when we're not focusing our time on like something that requires like the mind, we would be on our phones. Traditionally, in human nature, is time that we'd spend daydreaming or coming up with conclusions in our own heads, and so this time had been completely filled with information, and not good information, like kind of useless, shallow information. So, and to give an example of this, after class, the 15 minutes between classes, you spend the class being told information, and then for that next 15 minutes where you'd stand around and wait for the next class, in the traditional I guess earlier forms of humanity, but like the 90s, where you'd be either talking to your friends or you'd just be standing around thinking to yourself. Now it has been taken up. Now that time has been taken up through Instagram or Twitter or Snapchat. And what I've noticed is we've kind of lost our independent thought almost. Now, the next thing I've noticed, which is a bit lighter, is one thing with being off the grid is I don't, and knowing that the average time spent on your phone is for teenagers is at least 3.5 hours, at least, which is insane. And so that time I spend in the real world. Is it okay to call it that? The real world? For the first time ever, the season of fall has felt long. Like I've noticed, and it's the hardest thing to explain because it's like, how do you say that? Like, of course, everyone notices that it's fall outside, but you really feel it more. Anyway. I'll leave it at that. So basically, this has kind of been my sort of pitch to you, the phys ed teacher, and I don't know, if you thought it was all right, I'd be happy to come in and speak to grade 9 or 10 or 11 or 12 phys ed classes and speak in health unit about social media, because I'm passionate about it, and it pains me to see the world so changed and the fact that nobody's even aware of it. So, thank you for your time, and hopefully it's been good.